Hey, we're going to dive right in here and talk about pivot tables today. You're watching this video. Thanks for looking up this video. So specifically, I am going to help bookkeepers out that want to give your clients a report of categories, expenses by month. So this will also apply to just anyone wanting to learn a pivot table. So where to begin is to make sure that you have a header row of data. Using a pivot table is very important. You have some kind of a header row here, like I have here. And then after you have header row, make sure that your formatting is correct. For example, on the dates, if we didn't have a date in the wrong format, I'm going to just mess this up. I'm going to type 1/32/2017. Obviously, that's a typo. When I hit enter, and it stays on the left. So anytime you have a poorly formatted date that's not recognized, it's going to go to the left. Now, the one thing is you can make text dates appear to the left, center, or right, but just the default is going to have that appearance there. All right. So it's going to go behind to the right. Now, once you have your dates, the other thing you're going to think about is making sure that you're consistent with your text. And in other words, you'd want to have the same spelling for your text and your categories. A big problem would be if you had a space in the rents here. If I were to show you how that's going to appear, I've got this here with some spaces off to the side. If I were to turn on my data filters here and tried to sort the rents, often, okay, it might be kind of deceitful there, but I am trying to share with you how that's going to populate here. Let's just hold off on that for just a second here. When we get to rent, I'm going to show you how it's going to see that extra space in there and kind of mess that up here. The bottom line is make sure that we're consistent with how you type and categorize your text groups, okay? And the third type of data is just going to be your raw numbers, okay? So here we've got some numbers. I'm going to format those here. And okay, so we feel like we're prepared for the beginning of a pivot table, which is making sure you have a strong data source that's formatted. We observe that we have all these rows here, and we're getting down to row 200. Now, if you believe that you're going to have new data come in, maybe perhaps towards the end of the year, then I'd recommend that you create a table. To create a table, you're going to click on one cell and go up to the Home tab, or sorry, Insert tab, and click Table, or Control T on a PC, and verify that you have your data set for your table with headers. Click OK. And that is a table. I'm just going to change the formatting of that real quick here. Clear out that yellow I had before. I'll name the table. From table 1, we can just call it Transactions 2017. And now we're in business to create our first pivot table of this lesson here. So to begin pivot table, you're going to make sure that you're not hanging out over on the right-hand side. You want to be inside the data set, just anywhere. Pick one cell within your group of data. Then on the Insert tab, you'll go up to Insert, click Pivot Table, and we'll be ready to look at the range that it's selected. It's picking up on my table. If I didn't have named table, it would have just been table 1. If I didn't create a table, it would just be like A1:D200, you know, the data set range there. On a new worksheet is where we're going to place it. The last option is add this data to data model. That's pretty powerful. That might be a future lesson on how to create multiple tables and analyze them at the same point. Since we're just going to want to analyze one table, we'll just leave that alone. And we're going to click OK. Now, notice when we click OK, look down at the bottom left. We're going to create a new worksheet, and it's always immediately to the left of where we came in right here. So I'm just take time right here and just name this pivot. Okay. Now I've got two monitors, so my field list kind of popped up on my other monitor, so I'm going to kind of drag it in. It typically is going to show up on the right-hand side, and I'll drag it out just so we can see. We have 4 areas that a pivot table works with. So we have the, I'm going to try to see if I can't quite annotate that. It's going to draw some annotations. All right, I am going to talk about the rows right now and the values. So typically I think put categories in the rows and put data numbers in the values, and it will calculate them. All right, so we can drag category into the rows, and just like that, we have our list of values here. Now remember, rent was kind of tripping us up here. I specifically added some space there. So here you can see how it's kind of flushing out that, we'll see in a moment how it puts that together. Then I can either check amount or drag amount down into the values. All right. So what we're looking at is the grand total, $86,000. Let's go back to the raw data set to prove that's correct. So I'm going to go back to the raw data set, and this is our regular table of transactions. I'm going to go, the easiest way to create a total is to create a total row to calculate those. So inside the table, Control-Shift-T, or just go Design tab and click on the total row. And it created a total row here. Click anywhere where the field intersects with the total row, where you can hit the drop down and choose sum. Right on the money. So that number, $86,660.96, verify in the pivot table, it matches up nicely right in there. Okay. So let's talk about this rent. What's going on here is if we were to look at this rent here, that's the one with the space on it. So I'm going to go in and go up and change that. And I think it was this one. Yep, it was that one. I'm going to backspace that out here. Now, if you are concerned that you have spaces, then we would use the trim function to eliminate spaces. The trim formula could clean up extra spaces that were not intended. Okay, so I've taken that. I'm going to go back to the pivot table, and it's still there until we refresh. So what's going to happen is going to combine these two together. So our total rent should be $86.50. When I right click on the pivot table, there's a refresh button. And boom, we're back in business here. And we got that taken care of. Okay. If you wanted to see everything that was not including owner's draw, this 474, we could go in here and basically eliminate the owner's draw, take off the checkbox for any category you don't want to show inside the pivot table. And so that is a symbol there that represents we have a manual filtering out for that. Numbers update across that. All right, I'm gonna format this with a right click. And notice we have format cells. We don't want to do format cells. Instead, we want to do number format, which will then format all of the series here when we click number format. You know you have format cells right when it only shows you one tab in the format cells number. So I'll go with accounting and then OK. All right. So parking, 20 bucks. Let's see what happens when we go create a new record. And I'll do Control-Shift-T to turn off the total rows, or otherwise we would just come over here and make sure that they were off. Okay, I'm going to type 12/5/2017. Parking lot. Anybody hear the song Counting Crows? Pick up a parking lot. I won't sing it. But that's what I'm thinking of right now. Okay. Let's go with $8.75. All right. Another little trick here is you can right click and do pick from a drop down list to verify that you are indeed choosing existing categories that are already in the list above or below. Okay, now come back to the pivot table, and it still says that we spent 20 bucks on parking for this duration. That's not true. So keep in mind that anytime you make updates to your raw data set, you should update the pivot table, refresh. And we can just right click, refresh, and there we go, and it's moved up there. Now, if we didn't create a table in the first place, one thing that you'd keep in mind is on the pivot table tools analyze tab, there is change data source. And if you had just a raw set of data, not a table, you would need to make sure that it truly was including extra rows here at the bottom here. But with the table, the beautiful thing about table is the table will grow both directions, columns and rows. It will automatically update. Now, the exception would be if you were to insert a row inside of the data set, then it would grow as well automatically like formulas do. But you got to refresh. You got to make sure you refresh to get the latest data set coming in to do the reporting. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to share with you is what is going to happen when we want to see a month-to-month columns. Okay, so I'm going to take date and I'm going to drag it into the columns. And what happens is, depending on what version of Excel you have, you might have in the newer version of Excel, you might have it automatically grouped by month. But if you don't, we can take the really granular data of days and group them. So that's going to be really cool. We can group these with a right click on a single cell there, and there's a group button. Up here is group as well. You can find it up here too as well. Okay, and I would like to group it by months. That's correct, months. Wow. Okay, I'm going to hide this for just a second here. So let's look at that. We are looking at monthly data, and it's going to start to show you the grant subtotals here for each month that we worked with here. Incredible. Okay. I think that is really cool. It's a lot to look at right now, but you can really start to see some patterns and some data as far as that goes. Now, another thing is, let's go in and just do an update. I've got new transactions here. You can see December and some in November here. So I'm going to copy this. Easiest way I do is Control-A, Control-C on a PC, copy that. And then I'm going to go back to the raw data and paste it. Okay, and so I just added those new cells there. I'm going to go back to the pivot table and update, and I'm expecting to see some new stuff going in there. Okay. All right, so I'm up to date now. It might be a little difficult to see columns to the right. Let's do a true pivot. Let's make the months go vertical and the categories go the other direction. So to do that, we're going to right click, open up the field list. And what we can do is we can drag date down into the rows. That's pretty interesting there that we've got the category superior to the date months. Or we can drag category right below dates. That would be another opportunity to see it. Or like I was going to do, I was going to pivot and drag category over in the columns like that. And that's a nice approach that you see there. Okay. Now, a couple cool tricks you can do once you have a pivot table is you might be thinking, gee, what's up with this number here? I don't believe it. Okay, let me find something here. Like, I'm going to focus on rent. Look at that. Let's freeze right here. View, freeze panes. Look how 725. We've been just like clockwork, 725 each time, each month. And then suddenly it jumped to 1400, then it jumped to 2075. So I am concerned about that. So I'm going to double click on that 1400 because it is going to create a new worksheet with those transactions. So it's November and it's rent. When I double click, here goes, it creates, notice where we're at, just to the left on sheet 5 here was the result of that rent November. Now I'm going to show you that we've got Geekdom $50 on November 16th, but then we paid rent 2 times. So that could be a bookkeeping error and one that wasn't reconciled out, and that we could discover that that's a mistake in the books. Typically, you're going to export your transactions maybe from QuickBooks Online to Excel, and you would see that. But that's a big, big red flag, and one that we might not have seen if we hadn't taken the time to actually produce the budget expenses summary for the time frame on that category. So then what that would lead me to do is go to the financial records source, wherever the records are being kept, and analyze that. And then I would look for the reconciliation statement, pull up our bank statements, and see what's going on there. And ultimately, it looks like we would need to void one of those transactions to do that. So double clicking on any cell inside the heart of a pivot table will produce the results in a new worksheet. Another cool thing that we can do is we can double click on the actual subtotal. And what that does is it gives you everything. So because I double clicked at the subtotal, it shows the whole year of working with these transactions here. Now, I'm going to go back to the pivot table, and we're going to take a look at how to filter out, so we can just look at just a couple of items here that we want to. So we can go to the filter button here, and maybe I want to see training. Okay. And there we can see just a few things like that. What if you wanted to see what percentage of your options are? So we have the ability to do summarize values as a percent of the grand total. Okay. Now, changing the subtotal, I'm going to take a step backward, hit undo here. To do that effectively, what I would do is I would add the field list. Basically, I would create the amount 2 times. Okay. And I'll show you why in a second here. I'm going to now, this looks awfully confusing to see it 2 times, right? But on that second one, I'm going to right click and do summarize values as percent of grand total. And you'll start to see that that's our percentages of it here. Okay. So just soak on that there for a moment, and that will change. That should update if we wanted to change it to, let's say, cost of goods sold, for example. Just focusing on these right here. A nice opportunity that we would have to actually change this. You can go ahead and go to Design tab, and I like to go into the report layout and do show an outline form. And what that does is it changes these headers here. But other things, you might modify it by typing month over that. This right here, I would say percentage. This might be total. So you can definitely clean that up there. Do that. You can also go to the grand totals and turn them off, put them back on. as well. So, and then there's color. So plenty of opportunity there to make it how you want to. Now, I would just encourage you to experiment with creating pivot tables. So I'm going to do one more for you. I'm going to go to the expenses, raw data. And this time, I care about the vendors. Who am I spending the most money on? All right, so create a pivot table, a few clicks, insert, pivot table, new worksheet, here we go. I'm gonna double click and do PT expenses by vendor. Okay, so we know the drill. If we check vendor, since it's text, it goes automatically in the rows. Check amount, automatically goes and calculates that to side, unless there would happen to be any blanks or it didn't quite see it, then you might be seeing a count. So if you ever end up with count, looks like that, that's not bad. That just tells you that we had 16 transactions for Adobe CC, 12 for AdWords, 2 for Alkali, that kind of thing. So you can right click yourself into summarize values by sum anytime. Okay, let's sort that with a right click. Sort largest to smallest. And that will show us large. And then remember, we want to right click, number format to make that look better, accounting. Okay. Fantastic, okay. There we start to see our vendors. This is vendors. And this is our total. Okay. What about adding a better way to filter out these combinations? And that is called a slicer. So we have insert slicer. And this is to be able to quickly see something faster than going into the drop downs. The slicer was created in Excel version 2010 for the first time. I'm going to click on category. And when you do that, it will give you a quick list of options that we can choose here. So maybe I click on the rent. And I start to see how that looks there. It's really, really powerful, right? I kind of like to add more columns and maybe 3 columns and stretch this out to what that might look like there. And I could just start playing around with this here. Now you see how every time I click on one, it kind of jiggles a little bit here. So get your correct widths that you want to work with, and then go into the pivot table design. It is under, I believe, right click, pivot table options. Here we go, pivot table options. Display, no. I'm trying not to change the column widths when it updates. There it is. Layout and format, under pivot table options, uncheck auto fit column widths on update. Okay, so what will happen now is every time I click on the slicer or any updates, any refreshing and all such, it's not going to change the column widths each time. Okay, you might be wondering, okay, what's up with this rent here? That kind of might, you see how that, well, that's because originally we started with rent in there. So it does show you any deleted items from the original time you did that. So to get rid of that, you go to slicer settings, and inside the slicer settings, there's going to be hide items with no data. Should take care of that. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, look at that software there. I see one for MSFN Office 365, MSFT Office 365. So those two ought to be recategorized from the vendors in the actual bookkeeping source that you have there. All right. So that is a slicer. This is a slicer. Let's review how we got that. Click inside the pivot table, click on Pivot Table Tools Analyze, click Insert Slicer to get that going. And you can use those for really anything. You can go with category if you wanted to. And so we can have multiple ones in here. Oh, we already had category, sorry. Vendor, analyze, vendor. There we go. Let's kind of work that out here. So that would talk us, how do we delete a slicer? Right click. You can remove category to get rid of that. All right, finally, I'm going to put the months back in. I'm going to drag date to the rows. And what I would like to do next is create a quick little line chart. Okay, so the way I would do that is I would go to Pivot Table Tools, Analyze, and click on Pivot Chart. And that's going to pop in here. Choose the chart you like. There we go. And then I need a little bit better category that has something in here. That's not the prettiest there because of something. So you can see how that's conflicting there. So if your chart doesn't quite match up, you might need to explore the field list and kind of play around with it. So for example, maybe move the vendor over to the columns and to kind of see that. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense right there to me, to have the column and the vendor's date here. Be working on that here. But anyways, definitely there is a lot that you can do with the pivot table. And so just try exploring on your own, creating pivot table. Can't really break anything because if you're doing it on a new worksheet, it's all reporting per se. And what you're after is you're after trying to answer important questions on how to move the business forward by looking at key insights of your data set. I want to thank you guys for watching this longer video than I normally do, and I hope you found it beneficial. If you did, please go ahead and add a comment in the YouTube comments or hit the like button, share it with your friends. And lastly, if you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way, if you have questions, just send me an email at stevechase@sequentialsolutions.com. Or you're curious about other content that I've produced in the past, you can look up my blog at sequentialsolutions.com/blog. Thanks for watching.